Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. A few details about this podcast before we get started. Details about this podcast episode and more can be found at zachbitter.com. My website is where you can find all details about the podcast, including episode notes, links, timestamps, and a full transcript. You can also find my social media channels and newsletter sign up there. If you want to support the show and also gain access to an intro and ad-free audio version of every episode, as well as early release, consider joining the show Patreon page. You can also access my coaching services, which include my virtual group coaching package, products that I use, my Amazon storefront, which highlights a wide range of training and racing items that I use. Please consider sharing episodes you like on social media, liking, commenting, and writing a review. It really goes a long way in reaching new listeners. As a way to thank listeners who engage, I am raffling a 30-minute consultation with me every month for anyone who shares, leaves comments, and reviews the podcast. Just remember to tag me or send an email to hpopodcast@gmail.com to let me know if I'm not already tagged so I can add you to the raffle. Also, if you have suggestions for show topics or guests, you can also send those to that email address as well. Finally, a big thanks to S Fuels, John G, Delta G Ketones, and Element Electrolytes for sponsoring this podcast. Links and discounts to these brands can be found in the show notes as well as at zachbitter.com. Some seasonal discounts for the podcast sponsors include S Fuels has a 40% off site-wide for a limited time with promo code ZACH40. That's ZACH40. John G has up to 40% off. Delta G Ketones has a buy one, get one 50% off on one-time purchases of ketone esters or 30% off your first month when you subscribe. That sale is valid November 1st through December 4th. Element Electrolytes has their full winter warm beverage flavors ready for you, so check those out. All the details are also in the show notes.
Cool. So how are you feeling? I mean, you're getting to over a month out now, right?
Yeah, and a little bit, it's like 5 weeks. It's almost 5 weeks. So, well, 7 weeks. And then it's going to be 8 weeks. So that's 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah. It's wild because I had 6 weeks last weekend, and that was like big for me because it took just under 6 weeks to set the record. And it's like, I don't know, it's just like, wow, I had six weeks of recovery and it just flew by. It's like the weeks on the trail just crawl, just absolutely crawl.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like. I haven't done anything nearly that long, but it's like I've had quite a few people actually come on the podcast in the past to talk about different long hauls from like transcon experiences. I've had Christian on a few times who's done the southbound Appalachian Trail. And yeah, like it's just such an interesting kind of world within ultra running that I think gets a lot more attention now than it did probably a few years ago. But kind of like the rest of the sports is growing so fast, and then just kind of getting an idea of like where these different disciplines kind of fit within like the scheme of this like umbrella we call ultra running is just kind of funny to me because we're not quite big enough probably to differentiate a ton, but we're also big enough where like we have someone like you who can win a competitive 100-miler, but also go and crush a outright record on the Appalachian Trail. It's still something that's out there and really fun to see.
Yeah. It's interesting because I hear people talking about like, oh, this is like ultra performance of the year. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, if we're talking about like the specific people that like, you can, I guess, consider it ultra among individuals, consider it that. But then like, I think with like Ultra Running Magazine is what I'm thinking about. I think they take FKTs out of the consideration for that. But I mean, it doesn't matter either way for me. I mean, it's just, it was more of it's more than just getting like performance of the year or whatever. It's just a thing I've wanted to do forever.
Yeah. And I want to get in kind of like the drive behind picking a route like that. But yeah, like you said, I think I can't imagine it's not the fastest known time of the year at the very least, which I know Ultra Running Magazine does have a category for that. But yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure like how they weigh that in with. I think you're right about that. They don't look at FKTs as
Mhm.
like performance of the years. They've got like that separate category. But I wonder if it would count towards like if you were to have like a bunch of good races in the year and one of them be an FKT, does that count towards like the outright ranking of the year for that? I would
Um,
imagine it would.
no, it's actually, I remember last year for like Ultra Runner of the Year, like the different you know, how many 10 people, I guess it is. The consideration isn't FKTs aren't in that consideration cuz I did the Colorado Trail last year and did a couple other races, and they specifically said in this like little bio like um Tara also said Colorado Trail FKT, but this was not in the consideration for like Ultra Runner of the Year, any of those like
Okay.
considerations. So I mean, yeah, I don't know really why that is, but I mean, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. I think it's probably something that just needs to change over time because
Mhm.
I could see like a long time ago that being something to maybe not include because it's a kind of unsanctioned.
Mhm.
Not that
Yeah.
I mean there's plenty of unsanctioned aspects to ultra running in general, but like I guess FKTs are probably a step further along that line. But now
Yeah.
with the level of tracking they require for you to submit, because I'm sure you had to like produce like GPS files and
Mhm.
pictures and all sorts of stuff to
Mhm.
confirm that it was like done, witnesses and all that stuff. So like now I think like it's probably just as likely to be something where you can kind of ratify with with whatever like level of strictness we would see at most ultra marathons anyway. So
Mhm.
at that point, like with how much attention FKTs are getting, and maybe it's a post-pandemic thing now that like people are just more interested in them because that was like a lot of what people had options to at that point in time.
Mhm.
And maybe we need to reconsider what we put in because I just can't imagine sitting there if I were a voter and like looking at kind of like what people are doing and then have someone like yourself on there with this type of a performance and thinking like I'm just gonna ignore that in terms of like how it like especially because like when you think about it like and this is always like a fun way to kind of look at these things in general. You were out there for 40 days. So like you were on that trail for nearly 10% of the year,
Oh,
which is
whoa.
just funny to think
I
about.
didn't
Like
think about it
one,
like that.
yeah, yeah. When 2024 ends, like 1 out of every 10 of your days were spent during that project. So it's like it's pretty wild to think of just the
Wow.
dedication and everything.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, when you just look at
that's pretty wild.
yeah, I mean, you just look at the numbers in general. I like put a post up on this just because like people like don't always I think appreciate these things when they just see the headline of it at first, especially if they're not kind of engaging with the sport to the level of like you or myself. But I mean, the Appalachian Trail is 2,197.4 miles. It's got 464,500 feet of elevation change, crosses 14 states, and the terrain is anything but forgiving. And you did all that in 40 days, 18 hours, and 5 minutes, which is nearly 55 miles per day.
Mhm.
Was I'm just like, does that ever sink in? I wonder. I don't know.
Oh, man, yeah, like, that's a great question. I don't think it's quite sunk in, and I don't know if anything ever sinks in for me. It's just like, I don't really know, honestly. I just kinda, like, do the thing. And then I think I'm less of a numbers person than most people. Like one of my mentors, Warren Doyle, I just checked this document he made for me with like miles per hour, like on any given day. He had like start times, end times, like all this data and talking about like how far I was behind Carl at this point. It's a lot of data. And like I don't know why, but it's just like I've never been kind of a data person. I think I think it's really cool. Um, but I guess the thing when I think about like the performance, um, I'm really impressed by like the team, how the team came together and how everyone just had a job and it just effortlessly like worked. Everyone just was so on board with the FKT, the entire community. Like I've got a couple communities I'm a part of. So I have like the thru hiking community, and like hiker trash involved with that. And that's an endearing name. They like to be called hiker trash. And I've got like ultra runners and like ultra marathoners, like JP came out. And then I just have like the support from like really good friends and family. And I think that was like the most impressive thing, to have people just come out and just be so pumped to help out with this thing. So when I look back at them, like that was just like an incredible like community event. I'm just always so amazed with these FKTs I'm doing, where people are just so willing to like give everything and help. And I'm just very honored to be surrounded by a lot of great people.
Yeah, the ultra running community in general, it's like they view it as the front row seats of like the NBA finals or something like that to some degree, I think, where it's like they love the idea of being able to be there and helping out with it, because it's like it's being part of something really cool. I mean, it's kind of got like a bunch of different combinations. It's got that kind of like fulfillment of knowing, okay, I did something nice for someone else. And in a lot of cases, they probably have had someone else do something like that for them, whether it be like crewing for them or pacing for them at a race. So there's sort of like this like inner community exchange going on where it's like passing that forward. Cause I'm sure, like, I know for a fact that you're out there helping all sorts of other runners too. So, when people see that, I think they're like, well, she'd be a great person to help out because she's always doing it for other people too. And when you can keep that kind of loop feeding into itself, I think it's a pretty impressive scenario. And to some degree, it's what keeps this thing moving, because I had someone ask me before when I said I was having you on, be like, ask her how you budget something like that. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm sure it costs a ton of money to do it, even with a bunch of volunteer help. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of times these people are like willing to spend a lot of time and energy to help out with these things, and they're typically not getting a paycheck at the back end for that in any
Mhm.
meaningful way. So
Yeah.
it is something where I think like without that, you can't do these half the time.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And a lot of those people, I was just looking at how much I actually spent, because I just calculated all of it when I was on the FKT, and it's a really exciting number. I think people assume that you have to like, I'm trying to find it. I sent it to like a couple people. I think people assume that you need to like spend so much money to do these kinds of things. And you do. Yeah, it is necessary for sure. But I think you can also do it somewhat on a budget if you're willing to like stay on trail a lot. So I only spent one night in a hotel against my will, because a cop was being a little, it was just being a little uh scary. Yeah, he was just saying some things and mansplaining and making Rascal nervous. But I budgeted $15,000 for the trail, and I ended up spending $4,488.57. And that's for my Durango. My mom was driving the Durango, so gas for the Durango. And then I have a camper van, and so is gas for the camper van. And then food for pretty much everybody. Yeah, it was everything. I'm so surprised by that number. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. There's no way I only spent nearly $5,000 on that record, but I added up everything, groceries for everyone. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
That is interesting to hear, because I think like a lot of times people think like the deterrent to something like that is going to be the price tag, and to some degree it still probably is, but yeah, more so than that, maybe just like the time away as well, where,
Hmm.
like we were talking about before, you're out there for 40 days and then there's pre and post kind of like preparation and recovery before you're probably, able to do anything other than just relax afterwards. So, you're looking at almost probably 2 months of just, all
Hmm.
right, pretty much everything else I would be doing otherwise needs to be put on pause for this block of time.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I didn't factor in all of those expensive, but I also had like Airbnb that me and Rascal and my mom stayed at prior to getting on the trail, and just waiting for the perfect like weather window to get on trail. So that was just like only on trail expenses. But you're right, like there is like a phone bill, insurance that you have to pay during that time. Like there's all these other bills on top of just like the FKT. And, we talk about that with through hiking budgets too. It's people consider like, okay, so it's 2 miles, $2. What is it? No, it's $2 a mile. That's what people have been saying for a while to budget for the Appalachian Trail. So that's like the general budget, but then people don't take into consideration like you're also going to have to pay your mortgage and insurance and any phone bills on top of that, Spotify. So yeah, there's definitely extra expenses. And then when I thru hiked, actually, I always tell people to just like budget as much as you can, because when I got to the finish at A-Ball Bridge, I only had one resupply left in 2019 when I was just through hiking, and we actually ran out of money at the last resupply point, and we still had to get home somehow. So we had to figure that out. But yeah, it's just budgeting for these things is a special consideration. And it's actually, now that I think about it, I think I spent around like, oh man, how much was it? Was it like 4,000 just for like my through hike on the Appalachian Trail? So it's funny that I spent just over that, and that was in 2019. Obviously there's been some like inflation since then.
Yeah, right. But with inflation, it was actually cheaper for you to break the record than it was just to through hike it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess going fast maybe helps with that. You're not out there as long because days end up becoming the expense point probably to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to get into a little bit about just kind of your lifestyle that led you to doing this, because I think with the question when I asked just like, does it ever sink in? Sometimes I think with stuff like this, it's sort of like a process that is so long that you just normalize small things along the way until eventually you find yourself where you did, taking on a project like this and then completing it in record time. And it's like you look back at it and you're just like, you almost lose track of everything that actually went into that. But if you could actually go back and just start kind of itemizing everything you've done from like whatever got you interested into this sort of stuff in the first place, and then look at everything, it could be like just this massive amount of like essentially preparation and dedication and focus and everything that who makes you who you are, because who you are is, in my opinion, like a huge portion of like what actually allows you to be able to mentally kind of get through something like this. So I'm curious, like when you were a kid, were you like pretty active in sports and things like that? Or what was your lifestyle like when you were growing up?
Yeah. My parents got me and my brother hiking and camping a lot when we were like, I grew up in New Jersey and then moved to North Carolina when I was 5, where my parents moved us to North Carolina. And both in New Jersey and in North Carolina, we got really into the outdoors and got into camping and hiking. And then I was really, really into sports. Sports just made sense to me. School, like I struggled a lot in school, but sports just made sense, like athletics. And yeah, so I played soccer, and that's kind of where I developed the endurance side, because I was in midfield. Nobody wants to be midfield in soccer because you're running back from defense to forward and back and forth the entire game. And so I think like when I was younger, I just developed endurance. And then when I finally got to track in middle school, they threw me in the mile, and I was just there to hang out with my friends. But, I got to running, and I was really good at the mile, and then went on to cross country and high school, and was like pretty okay at that. Didn't go to college for any sort of running, but I did play rugby in college. So I've always had like some sort of athletic endeavor that I'm doing. I mean, I can't imagine my life without like an athletic like goal on the horizon. I've never had a period in my life where I have not had a goal in the horizon, which, when I get to that point in life, that might be a little scary, but I guess we'll see when I get there.
Yeah, well, maybe you won't have that point in life.
Oh, I hope
It sounds
not.
like maybe that's just a fixture. Yeah. I find like my experience has always sort of been like, I'll have phases of my life where I'll be very attached to a very specific thing I'm setting goals to. And
Mhm.
then I'll give it that thought experiment of just, oh, well, what will I ever do when I can't do this anymore? Or what will I ever do when I'm not good at this anymore to the degree that I am now? And as I would get older along that, I always find like, oh, you know what? It's not necessarily the activity that I'm attaching this like drive and like goal setting type mindset to. It's just having something to attach it to. And it just kind of like elicits, I think, a little bit of like an incentive to be curious about, what is exciting you so that when you do get to a point where maybe you don't want to do 40-day through hiking, fast pack type stuff, you have like something else to maybe tie that kind of passion to. And I think like, someone like yourself who's from my vantage point really likes a variety of different activities, you're probably really good at finding those things. And even though it maybe isn't something you see now, you'll probably find it when it's ready to be found.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. Like, when that point comes, maybe, hopefully it never comes where I won't be doing what I'm doing or athletic endeavors. Like, what would it be at that point? And I'm just like, it's just, I'm very goal oriented, very competitive. And I think whatever it is, it's going to just be something that's like a competitive, maybe I'll get into like bridge or something and get really good at bridge against like the old folks.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were doing cross country and track in high school and then you switched to rugby in college, were you doing any sort of running at that point still, or was it just all in on rugby?
Yeah, it was all in on rugby. I did a lot of sprinting. I did a lot of sprinting exercises and was really, really fast in rugby. I was like super quick. And granted, a lot of the women that I was against, who I was like running against, they were, half of them were like back of the pack. So, maybe endurance or just sprinting wasn't um their specialty, but I think, I mean, in our region I was one of the fastest runners, and then there was Naya, who I played against, who was faster than me and terrifying. She actually plays for the Olympic sevens team, and I remember races, or sorry, I remember games like a week prior to the game we had against UNC, is who she was like with. I was like sweating, so nervous to play against her, because what they did, I was fullback. They would kick the ball, they loft it really, really high. The rest of the team was like average, but Naya was incredible. So they loft this ball so high. And I'm the fullback, so I'm the one waiting for the ball come down to my arms. That's all you have to do. You just wait there. And Naya would sprint from the other side of the field, and as soon as the ball touched my arms, she would just dump tackle me so hard, just like all of her force into me. And I was like, that's just how it goes. It's like so violent.
Yeah.
But I think rugby really contributed a lot to kind of that mental toughness. Like, I grew up with a brother and an older brother who was pretty intense and, not quite a bully, but I mean, he just retired as a drill sergeant. So if that tells you anything about
Yeah.
who he is as a person. So I think like it was my brother and my family who installed like this tough mentality, but also rugby. It's like, well, just got dump tackled. I got to keep going, and I hurt so badly, but might as well just keep going. I loved playing rugby though. And I've gotten a couple offers from friends from ECU on like other teams, like adult teams, who's like, you should come out. I'm like, oh no, I would break so easily these days. I am not used to that rugby mindset anymore.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you kind of talk about some of that stuff, because it's like you have such a pretty diverse like set of kind of sports backgrounds. And I think it maybe is just a testament to when you get into especially these really long ultra marathons, so much of it's about just like both durability, being able to actually kind of like pick or having like being able to respond to a wide range of challenges.
Mhm.
It's like, like someone who makes a great cross country runner typically doesn't make a great rugby player. vice versa. And I mean, you've got a few different things in there that are just almost like in contrast to one another, to the degree where it just seems like that maybe is a strength of yours, where like you're out there on the Appalachian Trail and you're presented with something that is typically going to be a little bit of a shocker to someone else, where you might just look at it as like, oh, well, this is just something different that I have to navigate. But I've done that a bunch of times in the past through a variety of different things. So I know how to do this. And I wonder how much that's intuitive to you versus you consciously thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Those are great points. I think that's a good point. And, I don't want to speak for other ultra runners or ultra marathoners. Like all I know is my own experience. But I definitely find myself getting into certain situations and races and just pulling from different experiences, like you said, like in running, in rugby or in soccer, or just like in my through hiking experience as well. I pull from those experiences, and like from that, I know like it's going to be okay. And I just kind of like move on from there. I think that's the thing with through hiking. That's why a lot of people who come from through hiking make really good ultra runners, like Jeff Garmire, um, who else? I have a whole list of them, but a lot of through hikers transition. It's either climbing, rock climbing, or it's transitioning to ultra marathons. And a lot of them make really good ultra marathoners, because they, one, have really good base fitness, but they also have this mentality. It's like, no one's going to come out here and help me. Like, I don't have anyone waiting for me, or I'm not going to have an aid station. I have to make it to the next road crossing. I might have just pooped my pants and I have no food left, but you just got to keep going. And I don't want to speak for all ultra marathoners. I think like a lot of them do have that natural, innate mental toughness, but I think there's like a little added bonus when you've through hiked or, played a sport like rugby. It's just, you can pull from more experiences to know like you can continue on.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually think that's one of the more exciting things about some of these 200-mile races now, is it is sort of like this in between of what we've could traditionally, at least in the modern era, considered like the kind of racing side of ultramarathon and the through hiking, where I think there's like some strengths and weaknesses that kind of meet in the middle with those. And you can kind of see that kind of convergence as more people kind of get into those events too. And I'd be curious if you've got your eyes on any of the 200 milers in the future.
Oh yeah, for sure. I would love to do Cocodona. That's at the top of my list. And I actually, Jamil asked me if I wanted to do it for 2025. And I think I have like different goals for 2025 if my body is allowing of me to race in 2025. I foresee myself racing, even if I'm not okay. But, I have these separate goals, but I think like Cocodona in 26 might be a goal.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be fun to see you out there at that. I mean, you've had success at like races like Run Rabbit Run, and then all the way to the Appalachian Trail stuff. So it's like it seems like it would be a good one for you to do. It must at sometimes almost feel like there's too much to pick from, I would imagine, where like there's so many things you want to do, but then at the end of the day, if you want to do them at a high level, you kind of have to give them their own time, and there's only so much of that. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, did that change at all after I guess I mean, you've had the Colorado Trail and stuff already,
Mhm.
so it's not like it was unfamiliar to you, but does like knowing how good you are at like the Appalachian Trail type of stuff, does that kind of steer you in a different direction as to what you maybe thought you would be doing in the next couple of years prior to the project?
Yeah, it definitely makes me want to go after some more stout FKTs. Like I know I've been a big advocate for like women just going after this FKT, because I know women can hold these overall FKTs. We're just after, I'm sure you know a lot about this. I'm not sure really where I read it, but after 100 miles, women, start to compete, as a distance greatens, and women, the gender differences starts to even out. And so I knew that, but like going into the Appalachian Trail, like I wasn't completely 100% positive it would work out in my favor, you know, and then I finished and it just was like, whoa, it can happen. And so I think that inspired me to maybe go after some other FKTs and go after like the overall FKTs. So that changed that. But I think, on the Appalachian Trail, I just moved so slow. I moved so slow that I was like, I need to get my speed back. So I'm really itching next year to like do some really fast stuff. I really miss going quick.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's almost necessary for like a long career too, because you finish something like the Appalachian Trail, it's such a skewed so far to that end of the spectrum where your weaknesses in the moment are going to be kind of that opposite end. And I mean, we talk about short ultras as being kind of quick and fast, but we're kind of always dealing with the slow end of the spectrum to some degree. But yeah, I mean, like your turnover for a course like Javelina or something like that would be something you'd want to be doing a little bit of different training, I would imagine. So I like when people say, okay, I'm going to go back and do something a little bit different, so they are kind of keeping that bit of balance in there. And I think that's what not only keeps the other stuff exciting because you're giving yourself a break from it, but it keeps everything a little more well-rounded, so you don't get yourself kind of too pigeonholed kind of physically into one type of movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, with through hiking, but also FKTs, I mean, you're moving at a consistent pace that's like sustainable. And so that's oftentimes like for me, I was going uphill. If it was quick, maybe 17-minute miles, but most of the times it was like 20, 22. And then downhills, I could get it to like anywhere from like 15 to like 10, sometimes 9. 9 was like really exciting. But yeah, it's just like really slow and consistent. For me, that's what worked for me. But I'm really looking forward to like pushing my I think I feel very comfortable in like long endurance stuff, like just pushing my limits, sleep deprivation, like just going forever. I feel pretty comfortable with that stuff, but something I'm uncomfortable with that I kind of want to push myself to do is very speedy, fast. Like, Black Canyon's always fast, and doing, Javelina. Those are exciting races because it pushes me personally out of my comfort zone, and you have to go somewhere. I talk about this all the time with the Appalachian Trail, how it's like, we're pushing our limits, and it's really exciting to push that limit. But it's a different limit when you're doing these like faster races. You really have to have a good mentality. And I feel like my mentality when it comes to like going fast isn't as strong as it would be if I was like going like slow and for 40 days.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like you really like to kind of go after the thing that kind of scares you a little bit. And, maybe the Appalachian Trail doesn't scare you quite as much anymore it's in the rear view mirror at the moment anyway, unless you want to do it again. But, it's something where it's kind of objectively a strength of yours after what you did on there. So now looking at like, okay, well, what can I do that's going to kind of reignite that fear of, well, maybe I'm taking a risk here. I don't know yet, and figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've done Black Canyon 2 years in a row, and it was really hard the first year, and the second year I kind of understood the course a little better. And it's just like, you got to just keep showing up and doing those hard things and like pushing. I think that's why everyone comes to like ultras in the first place. No one comes to their first ultra and thinks like, wow, this is going to be like so easy. We come to it because it's like, this is going to be hard and it's going to be sustained, and let's see what I'm made out of. So I think it's just, trying to do more of that for myself, just keep pushing myself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's the draw. I think that might be why some people just continuously try to go up in distance too, because it's like, okay, I kind of checked that one off, and now let's try to see what this next one is like. So it can that's how you end up on the Appalachian Trail for 40 days, I guess.
Yeah. It's like, all right, what's next? There is a trail. There
Yeah.
is the American Discovery Trail, I think it's called, but it's just like, the United States map, but it just does this like essentially
Mhm.
this big rectangle around the United States. I want to
Oh man.
say somebody's going to correct me, but this is just off the top of my head with very little knowledge of the American Discovery Trail, but I believe this seems like too much. 1,500 miles. I think it's 1,500. Let me look it up real quick.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that because if you think about like a transcon is 3,000 miles, and then I mean the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail is essentially north to south, so you're looking at a couple thousand for each of those. So then you add in all the like little like tangents and dips and curves around what that trail probably does. I mean, you're probably getting well north of 10,000, I would think. So
Yeah.
wow,
The
yeah, I didn't
American,
realize there was actually a path there.
yeah, the American Discovery Trail is actually a different one than I'm thinking one. This one is 6,800, but I'm trying to think of like what there is one that just I believe it uses the Continental Divide Trail. It goes down, just as like a big rectangle. So we can always go further.
Yeah. Mhm.
You can always go further if you need to.
Yeah, I always think of Pete Kostelnick's run when he went from the furthest most tip of Alaska down to the Florida Keys. I guess it's uh, the longest road route you can take. Like if you're gonna just get in a car and drive, is the longest you can from one point of the U.S. to another. It's like I think it's like 5,000 5,200 miles, something like that. But he
Wow.
averaged he averaged 55 miles a day for 98 days on that one. It was all self-supported. He pushed like a stroller, which is just insane to me. It's like I still can't wrap my head around that one. That's just like just the number of things that could go wrong.
Yeah, especially with a stroller,
Yeah.
like the mechanics there, like being in the middle of
Mhm.
like Alaska backcountry. I don't know if it's in the backcountry, but man, that I don't know about that one. Self-supported, that's wild.
Yeah. And when you think about it too, it's like I remember him talking about this where it's like since it's self-supported and you are in some fairly remote areas, it's not like you can just go, okay, I'm gonna do 55 miles every day and just rinse and repeat. There are like some days where it's like, well, I can really only go 30 miles realistically because
Mhm.
if I keep going from here, I'm gonna end up in a spot where like I have to go like 100 miles the next day. So you have to like chunk it in a way that makes sense logistically, and so it's really kind of skewed as to how much he'd end up doing in any one given day. But yeah, that's one where I just think like, yeah, I don't know, it's one of those that kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, that is wild.
But that one's out there for you if you ever wanna get on the roads with a stroller, I guess. I don't think anyone else has done it that I'm aware of anyway. But so Pete might stand alone on that one for a while.
Some seasonal discounts for the podcast sponsors include S Fuels has a 40% off site wide for a limited time with promo code ZACH40. That's ZACH40. John G has up to 40% off. Delta G Ketones has a buy one, get one 50% off on one-time purchases of ketone esters or 30% off your first month when you subscribe. That sale is valid November 1st through December 4th. Element Electrolytes has their full winter warm beverage flavors ready for you, so check those out. All the details are also in the show notes.
To kind of back to what we were talking about before, where you were doing kind of rugby, and then so the next step was getting into ultra marathons. What was your kind of introduction to that?
Yeah, I thru hiked the trail, tried to thru hike in 2017, the Appalachian Trail, and had a panic attack 80 miles in, had to get off, and took 2 years to like, understand my anxiety and understand, my motivations, why I was going out there in the first place. And went back in 2019 and thru hiked the entire trail, 5 months and 10 days. And then, really wanted to keep up with the trail adventures, but I knew like I had to make money. So I couldn't be out there for like these long periods of time. Um, at least from what I thought back then. I was working as a backpacking guide and at a bunkhouse for Jen Farr Davis. And um I was inspired by her because before I beat it, she did hold the women's supported FKT. And I I was incredibly inspired by her. So I got on the Mountains of Sea Trail, which goes across the state of North Carolina. It's 1,175 miles from Clingman's Dome in the mountains to Jockey's Ridge in North Carolina. And I wanted to, see how fast I could do it, because it was also 2020 and, it was COVID, wasn't super responsible to be going into towns and resupplying. So I did get like a support crew together, and we set this FKT, a little quarantine crew. And we set the FKT on the MST. And then, Diane Van Duren, who ran for, I'm pretty sure it was Diane Van Duren that set the FKT on the MST before me. She was a North Face 100-mile athlete. And I was like, oh, like, I just beat her record. Maybe I could also do a 100-mile race. Like, maybe that's a possibility. And so for about a full year, I just trained. I did like a trail marathon in San Diego, and I lived there for a couple months, and then did a 50-miler in San Diego as well. And then in, I think it was September or October of 21, I did my first 100-miler and just fell in love with the distance. And that was pretty much my pursuit from, why I was doing ultra marathons, was to just get this adventure in and do 100-milers. Like, my first 100-miler, I did win, and that felt great. But I also had, this really neat experience where I ran through the night and, met a lot of really cool people doing the same. Aid stations are always fun. Your first aid station, like, all this food for me. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Everyone's so nice. People are timing my naps. Like, wow, this is so much different than through hiking. But yeah, so I got into 100-milers and was just doing a bunch of them, like, back to back to back. And then I started getting to like faster things, and doing more competitive races to see where I sat in the field. And another goal of mine was to do hard rock. So that was a big pursuit of mine as well, was to do races where I could like qualify for that. And so luckily I did that this year. But I want to go back every single year. I want to be one of those repeat offenders of hard rock.
Yeah, well, now you're in, right? So now it's a little easier to get back. So just keep applying. You'll probably find yourself on that start line quite a few times over the course of your career if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So like that kind of got you into the trail running side of things. I'm kind of curious about like your training. Like when you were doing the through hiking stuff, it's kind of an interesting background, because I would imagine that like were you doing much running when you were kind of in the through hiking stuff before the ultra marathons? Was it still kind of part of that training plan for that? And then when you switched to doing some ultras as well, maybe you skew it a little more towards that? I'd be curious about kind of how you structure things with that.
Yeah, before I got into ultras and like before through hiking, I in between 2017 and 2019, when I did have that period of like, discovering my motivations for why I was going for the Appalachian Trail, the through hike, I thought like it would be impossible to do like a marathon. So I signed up for like a half to like bring myself up to it. And then, so I did a half, I did pretty well, did a marathon, did like okay at the marathon. So I was like running a lot. I knew that like, I just knew like from cross country in high school, I just knew how much fun I had doing that. I wasn't the best in my state in cross country, but I really did enjoy the act of moving my body and running. But with through hiking, there wasn't really much training after through hiking. When I wanted to do the Mountains of Sea Trail, I got really into trail running, and I was like, this is incredible to trail run. Like, I was so used to doing like, 2 miles an hour with a backpack on me on the Appalachian Trail. So when I was trail running, I was like, oh my gosh, I could see so much more of the trail just, jogging. I did, I still fall a lot these days, but I mean, if anyone knows like my track history with like falling, like they would be mortified to know, like I fell 100 times more on when I was just getting into trail running. It was just like, I'm sure a lot of people can understand this like sentiment. It's just like so different from road running. I had just been doing road running, little in cross country, obviously, like the trails, but to go to like the Appalachian Trail where I was living and getting that crash course into trail running, it was so different. And I felt so often, and just like every day I just opened up my palms and my knees. They were always just so bloody and scabbed, and I was just a perpetual scab at that point. But I did enjoy it a lot. I love the fact that I could go for like 2 hours and see so much of the trails and then be back in before dinner time. And would have like had to be on trail with my backpack for like the whole day to be able to see that much. So that's like where that training came in for the Mountains to Sea Trail when I got into FKTs and faster stuff after the thru hike. Yeah, it was just a lot of adventuring on the trails.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So there was that mix of running for sure in there. Then did you do anything structured with like speed work or anything like that, or any sort of like kind of periodized approach with like different distances and things? Or was it all just like, hey, I feel kind of like, I guess what the sport has maybe kind of termed the Courtney DeWalter approach, where I kind of go out and I run. When I feel good, I run a little faster. When I don't, I run a little slower.
Yeah, I love her approach. And I think I connect a lot with her approach because getting into competitive ultra marathons, like I started out with Carl Meltzer as my coach. And so he is just like kind of a no nonsense guy. Just like he gives me, the plan was just like, do, amount of miles. And it was very much like, if you feel good, run faster. And I really like that. He pushed me a lot to like, get into races and to complete races and do a lot of 100-milers. He's the 100-mile king. So like, that's just natural for Carl to be that way. So I think like him and Courtney probably have like very similar approaches. And I really liked getting into trail running with him. Like when I was getting into the ultra marathon scene, he just helped. There's so much information to digest. And I'm glad I've like had this trickle of information. It hasn't been, I feel like if I got into the sport, I'd be super overwhelmed if I had a coach like Megan Roach at this point. Like if I had her, I would be overwhelmed at the beginning of my career. Now I'm coached by Megan because I had Carl for, I think we were together for like 2.5, 3 years. And then just this year was my first year with Megan. But if I had started out with her, I probably would have been, oh my gosh, there's so much to know, so much knowledge. I probably would have gotten overwhelmed just knowing myself. And she's a wealth of information. If anyone wants a really knowledgeable, great coach, I mean, Megan's the way to go and Carl's the way to go. It's just personally at that point in my life, it was like, I don't know if I could have digested all of that. All Carl had, we would chat about races and there wouldn't be like time goals. Sometimes there's time goals, but he would just generally be like, you want to eat this much an hour, go out there and you just want to run the downhills and the flats. And if you need to hike, you hike. And he was just very encouraging. And it was good to start out my career with him because even now, I'm not like a super like, I talked about this, like a data person. I'm not like big into data and it's just hard for me, I guess, like with, schooling, I wasn't ever, a numbers person or really good at math or school. And so I think it just makes sense to me to just like go off of feeling more so. But yeah. So there wasn't, to answer your question. Sorry. Yeah. To answer your question, there wasn't any like speed work at first. I think when I did JFK the first time, that's when Carl first like put a track workout on my schedule. But it wasn't anything like insane.
Yeah, no, I really like that because I think it kind of maps what I'll hear like Steve Magnus talk about this a lot. And I think he's got a really interesting perspective because, he was like a world-class miler in high school and then just sort of like plateaued right away for a variety of different reasons that he'll share if you listen to his stuff ever. But like one of the things he says is like, you have to take things kind of at the appropriate level at the right time and use that to progress versus getting like way too ahead of yourself. And he looks at it through the lens of like, just like the competitive pressure that you feel as a high schooler on the world stage versus what most high schoolers are dealing with, which is like probably like city based, maybe in some cases, maybe just their own school. And I mean, I think about that with like my own development with running, where like it really wasn't until like I was well into ultra running that I had any expectations to be like competing with the best.
Hmm.
And when I think about like, had I had that expectation when I was in high school, I don't know that I would have responded well to that and
Hmm.
responded well to like having all the information that would be available to a kid with that level of perspective or that level
Hmm.
of like potential.
Hmm.
So like for you to say like, Carl working with you in the beginning, he was able to give you the things that were needed so that you don't find yourself in a really rough spot like, "Oh, I'm 40 miles into this ultra marathon, I haven't eaten anything yet." Like like you probably needed some level of support around kind of like some of the strategies like there, which he could definitely give you, but you probably didn't need him to be kind of staring over your shoulder telling you to do 400-meter repeats and, make sure you get up to the top of the hill in this split and kind of just like you said, overwhelming you with information.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was perfect, getting into the sport. And I think like I would still love to be coached by him. He even mentored me during the Appalachian Trail. Um, but like as we just keep progressing, I think I was just like, I think also, I mean, being a lady too, having a lady coach was like really nice because I was dealing with a lot of at the the end of last year, beginning of this year, I was dealing with a lot of like, um, you know, I forget what they call it, the triad, the female athlete triad. So I was
Yeah, like
dealing with
Rett
like,
syndrome. Yeah.
yeah, I was dealing with like some things involved with that. And I was like, okay, I really need to, dive a little further into why this is. And, Megan just has so much knowledge on that. One being a woman, but also, I mean, she studies women. She's a doctor and she studies women in sport, and she puts so much time into like information gaining knowledge on that front. So I was just like, I think I need to like move towards that, and maybe eventually I'll go back to Carl. But both of them were just so crucial to like my development as an athlete. And now like looking back at my training with Carl, I'm like, whoa, that would be really nice. But it is nice to have Megan just like putting the structured training together. Like today I have this really structured workout, and it's like I know that's gonna benefit me. It's gonna get me speedy.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. And when you have a real kind of concrete objective where it's like, okay, I want to get fast again, then sometimes I think it's nice to have someone else that it's at least, if for nothing else, someone who you trust that you can kind of bounce those ideas off of where it's like, okay, like help me kind of scaffold what this looks like and then help me respond to what I'm feeling when I go through these different kind of ebbs and flows with that sort of an approach. But cool. Awesome. Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about was maybe a little more specific to your project with the Appalachian Trail and one that I think people naturally kind of gravitate towards, which is food. Like, what are you eating out there? I guess is maybe the broad question, but I'm kind of also curious as to like the logistics behind that because obviously you probably, when I think of ultra running in its more kind of abbreviated sense of 100 milers and below, it's like you have your aid stations, you have what you carry on you, and you can generally kind of be fine with that. But when you're looking at the prospect of going for 40 days, how are you kind of setting that up and making sure you're not getting too far behind on fuel when you know you got to go back out there and hike and run all day again?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a couple factors to that. I had done a lot of research prior to the FKT. Obviously, like it's way different than an ultra marathon. Like the fueling strategy is way different on the Appalachian Trail than it would be for an ultra marathon. So I did a lot of research because in 2020, when I was on the Mountains of Sea Trail, I didn't know what I was doing. I had the diet of a thru hiker. So I was eating like Hostess cakes and, really trashy food that wasn't sustaining me. And to this day, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Even though it was like way flatter because like you go through the mountains, but then it's just like the Piedmont and the coastal region is just completely flat. Even though it was like easier terrain, my brain just felt like scrambled eggs. Like I couldn't process information quickly. I had iron deficiency because you could tell my lips and my gums were just like white. I was pale, did not look okay. And so I really wanted to do a lot of work on my nutrition. And so I had Carl mentoring me. Like, he has a successful FKT on the Appalachian Trail. And, he gave me a couple guidelines that I wanted to look out for. But something I told my crew prior is like, I want to do a lot of like whole foods. I want to get my, iron and, fats and proteins. I want to get that mostly from like these whole foods. So whatever that takes to get that, whatever it takes, let's do that. But I also, from Carl's advisement, he was like, every single stop I had with my crew, so at every single road crossing, he drank a protein shake. And so on average, I had about 6 to 7 crew stops a day. And so at those crew stops, I would drink Ultragen by First Endurance, and it was 320 calories. It is 20 grams of protein, BCAAs, and it's a lot of carbs. It's just really good stuff in that. So I'd have, 6 to 7 of those during the day, but then I had one at night. So that helped with recovery during the night. But Carl also like recommended, in the morning, getting 500 calories for breakfast. You want to do 300 calories a day, 300 calories an hour for the time that you're moving. On top of that, you have your protein shakes at every single crew stop. And then at dinner time, it's about 1,500 calories. And I got on the trail. I gave my crew that information, and I told them like whole foods is what I want to focus on. But other than that, I didn't give them anything else, because it's really important on these supported FKTs to just like, if you're able to go fully supported. Support. You can have, as long as you're self-propelled, you can have any type of support. So it was really important for me to like have these people on my crew who are really knowledgeable about nutrition and ultras and just like how to crew. So there's a lot of aspects with the team, but about day 11 or day 12, we gained another crew member, Amy and Steve, and they had a camper van, and that was her job. She took that job on to herself, where she was going to be the camp cook, and she kept track of my fats, my proteins, my carbs. She made really great dense burritos for me, like of all varieties. She made little sandwiches, really easy for my body to digest. It wasn't like too heavy. And so it was really important to have like people like that who are solely focused on nutrition. She also fed the crew as well. She'd make like group dinners. Excuse me. But with the logistics side of getting that food, like, Amy was making it, but the crew, so I had pacers for pretty much 80% of the entire trail, I would say. And those people carried all my food, carried all the water. They pretty much carried everything. Sometimes I carried my own phone. But I had my tracker. That's the only thing I had on me. And they kept track of when I need to eat. So they would hand me a snack every like 20 minutes. So I got the 100 calories for that like 20-minute section. So it was fully supported, and I'm so lucky. I said this in the beginning, I'm so lucky to have such a great community around me and people that were so willing to like give up their time to help with this FKT. So I view it as a team sport. Without them, if I was the one out there making decisions about what I was eating or when I was eating, keeping track of my fats, my proteins, my calories, like I wouldn't have been as invested in the running side of it. And my job on the FKT was just to be the runner. I didn't have to think about what I was eating when I was eating. I just had to think about moving, and I trusted that my crew was going to make really good meals and they're going to feed me as well. Because oftentimes I also got like hand fed too. Most of the times they're hand feeding me at breakfast and dinner. And then at cruise stops, if I had like a moment, they would hand feed me whatever it was, just force feed me. I didn't have any decisions. I had no autonomy out there. They were making all the choices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's perfect. It's like, I mean, you've clearly put a lot of thought into this prior to the project starting. I mean, you made like sort of like a passion out of this whole through hiking thing in the first place. So like your just sort of like ability to kind of know what to do and probably what to plan for and what are things to actually worry about with things that you don't really need to worry about that you'll just be able to problem solve in the way. Like then you offload all the real like kind of stuff like what you just mentioned, which I think was a really good explanation of kind of all that goes into it and not having to think about that and just respond to like just be like, just tell me what to do. There is a huge cognitive like reduction for you there, where then when you get to that spot where you're just like, I'm ready to break down and cry on this rock in the middle of nowhere, you're able to actually kind of center yourself and keep going forward because you're not also trying to calculate, okay, did I get enough protein today? Did I get enough calories? That's in trying to thinking about that because you've already kind of planned all that out and then offloaded it to somebody else. I think that's just like such a good idea to do. And sounds like you had great people helping you with it too.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. There's people that um would be great with FKTs because they're so fast. And if they had, I mean, I know they have a lot of support. FKTs are so cool that you could go fully supported. Like you can't do that in ultra marathons. Like most ultra marathons, you cannot have people mule your gear, mule your food. I think if more people got into got into FKTs, like the people who are exclusively doing ultras, they'd be surprised at how well they can really do if they're going fully supported. I mean, that's fully offloading. If you have a good team behind you, you are able to completely just like, I had to worry about when I'm using the bathroom. And also sometimes like, sometimes I do math for like trail miles, but like Rascal
Yeah.
had that stuff already. I was just doing that because I wanted to know when I was going to go to sleep that night. I was trying to like do my average pace and figure out, okay, if I have this many miles, like how long will it take me to get to camp so I could go to sleep earlier. So that's the only reason I did that. But like all I had to think about was moving forward. And that, like you said, it would just help like keep my mind free. And also, oftentimes I don't really make the best decisions in these FKTs. So having a team doing all the thinking for you, I mean, that's going to help the FKT tremendously because you're not doing this skewed math with like a tired brain.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things where another thing that kind of stuck out to me, it almost led me to want to ask about the kind of nutrition side, because I think this probably plays a pretty big part of that is like when I started kind of looking into kind of everything you had done, one thing that was really interesting was the pacing strategy that you employed. I mean, most people I'm sure would think like there's probably some level of like just breakdown where you're going slower or you're covering less miles at the end until maybe you get really close and you get kind of this like finish line syndrome of, all right, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. But you I think by pretty much objectively negative split this, even if you look at like, I know going southbound you have the whites and that's probably the most difficult part of the trail early on and you're going to cover less miles with the same effort, but it seemed like you were really actually gaining momentum and putting your bigger days on the back end of this project, which I don't think we see typically with these longer efforts.
hmm Yeah, I think I think with these longer efforts, like it would be my hope that I could have been ahead in the very beginning. That was the hope that I would be like feeling great and be so far ahead. But I think it's nerve wracking to put so much time and effort into an FKT this long and not want to be ahead in the very beginning. Cause it's like nerve wracking to like be that far behind. It just kind of happened to where we were, I think I just read Warren Doyle's statistic, but I think we were about 120 miles behind at one point, of, the record. And that naturally, like you said, like it's going to be harder to go Sobo because of the whites and because of Southern Maine. So I was already behind because of that. Um, and the trail, it never gets easy, but it just gets, it's not as technical, as difficult as, the Northeast. So when I got to Virginia, Connecticut, New Jersey, some of New York, not all of New York, some of Pennsylvania. And then like when I got to Virginia, Maryland as well, I was able to just put down really, really big days just because the trail allowed it. And if you see like the profile of the Appalachian Mountains, you can kind of see like, the whites and Maine are just like really, really mountainous. And then you get to like Vermont is also very mountainous, but then it starts to like, kind of even out, and there's like, more hills, but, there's some mountains in there as well. But then once you get to like, Virginia ish, it starts getting mountainous again, but it's way different mountains than you would encounter in New Hampshire. So yeah, I think it wasn't by design that I was, chasing Carl Sabe, like the ghost of Carl Sabe the entire FKT. I think it was up until like 6 days. I think it was 6 days to the end, to where like we were there with him. Like I think I was 3 miles behind in Irwin, Tennessee, which is incredibly close to the beginning of the trail, or like the end where it ends at Springer. So I don't think it was by design, but it worked out. And it's just another strategy with these FKTs. I think, like I mentioned, it's so nerve-wracking to be that far behind, and to like to put that much time and effort into an FKT, and like maybe it won't work out, but you're gonna have to just keep pushing and see if it's gonna work out. I think it's nerve-wracking. So it's just another strategy that I don't think a lot of people have employed. I did it by accident, but I think I did a lot of things that were different from other Appalachian Trail FKTers, such as like being behind the entire time and catching up. But also like, what was the other thing that I did differently? Oh, I just lost it. But there's like, oh, right. I did 100-miler like a month before the FKT. And I remember a lot of mentors saying like, that you shouldn't do that. You're going to be wrecked for the trail. And like, that would make sense. But I viewed it in this way of like, okay, it's just going to be a really good training run, really good time on feet. And when I get there, hopefully like I'm recovered enough. It's not like you're moving super fast on the AT anyways, but that's just another different thing I did. Like I had a lot of mentors saying you want to like not race. I think it was like 2 to 3 months before. So you're just like 100%. But as soon as you get on the trail, you're not going to be 100%. And you're not going to be 100% like from the get-go. First day, you're pretty much working with like 80%, and then it just keeps dwindling from there.
Yeah, pretty much everyone I've talked to that's done like these, like, not just, I hesitate to call them multi-day, because it's just so beyond multi-day. It's like multi-week, where they kind of talk about this like scenario where you sort of have this like gradual degradation over the first few days, and it gets easy to kind of get into your head there and think like, if it keeps going down at this rate, I don't know if I can there's no way I can tolerate this whole thing. And then eventually sort of that level of discomfort sort of bottoms out, and you sort of like normalize, and you're dealing with like this like subpar but not terrible sensation for the duration of the project. So then it's about, can I manage this relatively poor feeling for a long period of time versus it continually getting worse and worse and worse entirely throughout. And if you kind of get caught up in the emotions of that kind of continual downgrade in those early days, you can maybe kind of sabotage your own project really early on in that case. So is that kind of was your experience too with these longer things, where you kind of have that sensation?
Yeah, I actually talked about this before, but I enjoy multi-week. I've found out that I enjoy multi-week over multi-day, because like you said, like it's just, you feel like your body is just breaking down so quickly in those first couple days. And it takes like probably for me, it took like 2 weeks to finally feel like I'm on a roll right now. I feel pretty good. And at one point in Connecticut, when it's super flat, I thought, oh, this is easy. It's not easy. It wasn't easy. It was just for a moment. But yeah, it was like the multi-week, your body, it's so odd that your body gets used to the sensations of like waking up at 3:30 or whatever time and then going to sleep, but you're doing 17 and a half hours of movement. And it's so strange to say, like, your body just gets so used to that. And, you know, at times there is like, you know, for me, there was my muscle tightness. Like I had some hamstring tightness in the Shenandoahs and, you know, some like, you know, knee pain, but that, I mean, it went away, with like the, the inclusion of like more stretching at the end of the night, which was, I mean, just insane. I'm always amazed at how stretching just takes care of so many issues. And that's, you know, on the trail, that was, it was a testament to that. But yeah, so like I almost enjoy the multi, like looking at the Colorado Trail, that was 8 days. And I just was so broken down by the end of it. But if I had gone, like maybe if I had done a, you know, yo-yo, maybe I would have felt okay by the end of that effort. But I do enjoy the multi-week. It's just your body just gets used to it. And they say in the thru hiking community, it's you're getting your trail legs. And by the time
Yeah.
you get your trail legs, you're like off to the races.
Awesome. Yeah. I wonder too, just like with how detailed your nutrition approach was, how much of that fed into kind of you being able to kind of sustain just like those bigger days near the end. I know, like, I think Carl maybe talked about this when he did it, because another topic I've had kind of come up when I've talked to people doing transcons and Appalachian Trail type stuff is like the folks that are able to do it, and like you're probably going to lose some weight almost no matter what. But if you can kind of really limit that to maybe like a few pounds versus like, oh, I lost 20 pounds, the people that could maintain weight the best tended to feel better at the end and then also bounce back a lot quicker after.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it was Dean Karnassus who told me, because he's done Transcon a few times, and he said one time he lost a bunch of weight and another time he basically maintained. And he said like it was just night and day difference. Or it might have been Ray Sahab who told me that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, it's just like such a like, and it's a lot of it's in the recovery. So like your 2025 season may depend on like how well you were able to kind of eat and stay on top of that stuff during this project, because you'll
Mm-hmm.
probably feel like your energies are back a little quicker.
Yeah. I mean, it's we're almost 2 months out, or nearly 5 weeks out from, sorry, not 5 weeks, 7 weeks out from the FKT. And I'm like, I did a pretty good run yesterday. I felt really good. My body feels good. Like I do get some like muscle tightness. And the last day I did have like a slight, glute injury. And I felt like the glute and the tightness in the hamstring, just all of it was connected. So I at times I do feel that, but like I feel pretty good. It did take like some time to get back into running, but I was I I lost some weight. It wasn't like an incredibly it, none of my pacers who came in who saw me like mid attempt said I looked like really hungry or I looked like unhealthy. And I think it was
Mhm.
just due to the fact that I was constantly eating out there. I think it was like 8 to 10,000 calories a day, and those protein shakes were just so crucial. Um, yeah, it's quite the phenomenon being out there, and having your body
Yeah.
adapt to this thing that seems impossible.
hmm What What was it like when you finished and you got back home and you took a shower and slept in your normal bed for the first night? Was it just like this like overwhelming like, oh wow, this is really what comfort is?
You know, it's funny. I no, I didn't think that. Like I missed a good, I always miss a toilet and a sink with running water when I'm doing these
Yeah.
things. The act of like the convenience that we have in the modern day of being able to wash our hands with warm water. I barely wash my hands out there. Um like and I had a strategy for like, you know, staying clean, but it wasn't like the fact that we have warm water where we can use soap and wash our hands. And then there's towels right there that we could dry our hands with. The convenience is wild. I think I was more mind blown by the convenience. I generally enjoy using the bath. I know this sounds so weird. But I generally enjoy using the bathroom outdoors a lot more than I do in a bathroom. Even though the place I'm staying at right now has a heated toilet seat. That's incredible. First time using one of
Yeah.
those. But like I generally enjoy that. And I also enjoy, I really enjoy like being, this sounds so cliche, but being like in the trail and just like, being dirty and like you're just giving it all you got. And sleeping on trail, I get my best sleep when I'm outside, with a couple friends in tents and we're just like having a great time. And for half of the time I did sleep in a tent, half the time I slept in the van. When I got home and I started sleeping in the bed, yeah, it was super comfortable. And the showers, hot water, like I can't get over the fact that we just have hot water coming out of these spigots, or like the sinks in the showers. I think I was more just amazed by the convenience of hot water. I remember only taking 3 showers during the 40 days. And each time I took that shower, it was just like, oh, like this is living right here.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely, I would imagine, gain like a really, really next level appreciation for some of those comforts when you're out there like that. And I think like the backcountry hunters talk about that a lot too, where they'll be out there for like multiple days, kind of on a hunt, and maybe they get rained on for a period of time and stuff like that, and then they go back home afterwards, and it's like, oh wow, I actually like was taking all of this for granted, and almost like this reset of like how appreciative you should be about some of these things compared to what you typically get to when you're just like living amongst it the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that aspect of like, being on trail and then getting to like the comforts. It almost like to a point, it almost feels like I feel guilty for like having all
Yeah.
of these comforts at a point. I'm like, wow, this is almost too much, too much comfort.
Mhm. Yeah, you need like a transition phase. Like let's move into like an RV first, and then back into the house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, I had one more question for you, Tara, that someone sent me before the episode, and one was that said that the rumor has it you had 4 toenails removed before this project because you thought they were just going to get in the way if they were there. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. I tend to lose my toenails and they really slow my pace down during really long stuff like Benton MacKay Trail, Mounds of Sea, Colorado Trail, even some 100-milers. They just really slow me down. So I knew like preemptively I wanted to remove the big toenails, especially those always fall off. But I also got the 4th toenail from the end removed as well on both feet.
Right on. I think Pam Smith and I want to say Scott Trayer maybe was telling me that they've had their toenails removed, just all
Mhm.
of them, just like there's no need for these. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Scott. Hopefully, I'm not throwing Scott in a pool he's not actually in, but I want to say he was telling me like it's just do it. You don't need them. There's no reason for them at this point. Like it's way better on race day and after race
Mhm.
day, and yeah, it makes you think. So, well,
Yeah.
I guess you're at least partly in the toenailless group now. So,
Yeah. Yeah. The podiatrist, asked my podiatrist the first visit, I was like, can I get them all removed today? And she was like, it was a guy who's doing the first round. He's like, absolutely not. And I was like, why? It's like, oh, you'll see. And it was so painful. At
oh,
least,
like walking
I
on
don't,
glass. Yeah.
yeah, the way he was doing it was painful. But then the next time I had this other lady and she like, it was my big toenails and it went so quickly and it was so like not painful. So I wonder if there was like also some like doctor, differences there as well.
Yeah, she was way better at toenail removal. She was
Yeah.
oh, that's funny. Cool. Well, Tara, I mean, it's been awesome to kind of hear a little bit about kind of how you got into the sport and just where your kind of passions are heading. And obviously, I mean, I don't know, like this has got to be some sort. I think this record is just. I think we're doing it justice asking whether it's one of the better races of the year. I think it's one of those that when you think of just things that people have done in the modern ultra era that stand in very, very like small groupings of results, this one's up there with it. So, um, I mean, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and kind of hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is great. So many different questions that I've been getting.
Yeah, I tried to listen to some of the stuff you've done already, and sometimes I like to wait a little longer to have someone on after something like this because then it's like you see like kind of what all the upfront stuff is, and then you can kind of look at okay, where did maybe it not get explored, what else would
Mhm.
add to the catalog of information out there. So But yeah, your story's been getting told. It's been really cool to see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's fun to tell the story. I'm hoping to, eventually the podcasts are going to end, but hopefully there's like some sort of telling in my own words. I do have the YouTube channel that I'm doing like those
Yeah.
daily update videos on. Um, but yeah, hopefully one day I'll have like a medium to be able to like tell the complete story of the FKT.
Yeah. I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of let the listeners know where they can find you. If I know you're active on Instagram and you've got a great YouTube channel, and yeah, what are you up to outside of running?
Yeah, I make videos on my YouTube channel, Tara Treks, Treks. Right now I'm posting like daily updates uh from the Appalachian Trail. I vlog during it, and also have an Instagram account where I'm posting like shorter style videos of daily updates on the Appalachian Trail, and that's Tara.Dower, Dower.
Awesome. Well, hopefully they go over there and follow those, because those are great
Yeah.
opportunities to kind of see everything that goes in there. And then, yeah, and then maybe once the podcasting kind of settles down a little bit, you'll start your own podcast. That would be my
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah, I was thinking about starting one soon with a friend, but I don't know. I think I, I enjoy. There are so many ultra podcasts. I don't think I have a lot to add to that, but it would just be cool to do like some short series with like my crew, and just asking them questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, let me know if you ever want to explore that. I've been in the podcast world for quite a while, and I think you're right. There's a lot of ultra content out there. So, I mean, that doesn't mean that you can't add to it, but I've always found like kind of keeping a little bit of a different like type of show going has been rewarding for me, because it's like I love ultra running, but sometimes having something a little bit different works too.
Hmm.
To have something to dive into both cognitively and kind of learning the whole podcast side of things. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it'd be fun to have like a series for you and your crew to kind of go over some of the storytelling, be kind of like a campfire chat.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot of stories from that need to be shared.
Right on. Well, cool. Well, maybe we'll see that down the road. But again, Tara, thanks again for giving me some time to chat about everything.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Here are some discounts and promos for the HPO sponsors. Delta G Ketones has 20% off with BITTER20 promo code, and they also offer free consultations to help you assess how their product would best fit your lifestyles. Head to deltagketones.com. Element Electrolytes has a free sample pack with purchase and satisfaction guarantee, meaning if you don't like it, they will give you your money back, no questions asked, and you don't even have to return the box. Go to drinklmnt.com/HPO to get that free sample pack and try out all their flavors with your purchase. John G Apparel has 10% off with promo code BITTER10. Check out their AFO shorts if you're in the market for a new pair of running or gym shorts. That's johng.com, JANJI.com. S Fuels has a 15% site-wide discount. Go to sfuelsgolonger.com. All links, promos, and discounts can be found in the show notes, as well as every episode landing page. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.